Today is potluck after the morning services. If you can stick around for that, that's great. Tonight is our small groups, and there's a group that meets here. There's a group that meets at Harry's house, and for the group that meets here, there will be snacks and finger food in the annex afterwards. And so look forward to seeing you there. Look forward to spending some time with you. By way of announcements, Temple Kuntz has been selected for consideration as an elder in the congregation, and we ask you to keep them in your prayers, and let's prayerfully consider this decision. When I came here, to me, there were two immediate things that we needed to work on, and one was we needed to add to the eldership. We definitely need to do that to keep the eldership in place. The second thing is we need to prepare the congregation for growth, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But we certainly need to consider Temple. His name's been set forward, and if you have any concerns, you can express those in writing to the elders. Aubrey Hawthorne fell and broke his hip. He had surgery on Wednesday. Do we have an update upon that situation at all? Okay. 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 All right, so keep the Hawthorns in your prayers. Renee Hamilton will have cataract surgery this week, it says. And Susan Brown did not have, she hates this announcement, but she did not have ablation, but it's going to be rescheduled. I leave on Tuesday for a trip to Liberia. It's a short trip. I'll be gone a week, I believe, just about a week anyway. It's maybe 8 days. I don't remember if it's 7 days or 8 days. But I'll be gone next Sunday. Ralph will fill in on Sunday morning. Temple will be filling in on Wednesday while I'm gone, and covering the Bible class on Wednesday night. So keep that effort in your prayers. I do want to make mention of something, and I'm going to mention it this morning in Bible class as well. I really want you to pay attention, if you can, to this church growth workshop that we have coming up on the 12th through the 14th. That's occurs right after I get back. And so that's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's Friday for about 2 hours starting at 7. It's Saturday for 6 hours. It's a 3-hour session in the morning, lunch, and then a 3-hour session in the afternoon. And then on Sunday morning, he will have Bible class and the sermon in the a.m. hour. David Hamrick is a man presenting this. I actually am working with him. He is over World Bible Institute, which is who I'm traveling to Liberia for. But he's very good at church growth. I teach denominational doctrines and world religions, and I've taught personal evangelism and some other courses in schools of preaching. But on this denominational doctrine and world religions, when I was given that assignment, I started diving very, very deeply into what's going on with the denominational world. And what I found is denominations generally are dying. Some of the major denominations, such as the Episcopalians, claim that if they continue to decline at the rate they're declining, there will not even be an Episcopal church in this country by 2050. Dying. Churches are dying. And you might say, well, that's good. Well, you can look at it that way. I'm certainly not for denominationalism. But I think it actually indicates a bad thing that's taking place in our country. People are not, I won't say they're not interested, but they're moving away from organized religion very quickly. And so when I came across these statistics, I said, well, let me do a little dive into what's going on with us in America. Churches of Christ are growing across the world. What about America? We reached our peak in 1985. We've been on the decline since 1990. We are currently losing, since 2015, the average has been, we've been losing 2,000 members and 9 congregations per month. Now, you put that in a business model. If you owned a business that was losing that many customers and that many offices each month, what would you think about it? There's a problem, isn't there? But I don't think it has to be that way. But we've got to change our mindset, and that's what this seminar is about, and I want to follow it up with some other things, but what the seminar is about is changing the mindset. And it's a workshop that we're going to interact. He's not just going to lecture. But there's this mindset that has developed over, maybe, 3 generations, maybe a lot more than that, maybe 4 generations, where you've got this consumer mentality where most members think, I believe, that the professionals do the work, and so we have elders, deacons, preachers, they do the work, the members sit in the pew, and they contribute. And folks, that'll kill us. That will absolutely kill us. Every member needs to be involved in personal evangelism. Every member needs to be involved in reaching out into the community. We can do this. And so David Hammer is going to give us some ideas. I've given, I think, all the elders and deacons a copy of his book to read. That was about the first thing I did when I got here. And so they've read that. He's going to cover some of that material. And then when he gets finished, I want to, later in the year at some point, probably in early summer, start having some classes to train people on how to do personal work, because I think it can be done. The problem is many people have never been trained to do it, and they don't know how to start, and so they'll talk to their friend, and they'll go from A to Z to X to, they're all over the place wherever the friend wants to talk about, and they think we're talking about things, but we're really not getting anywhere. And so their friend asks, well, why don't you believe in instrumental music? And we talk about that. And then, I got a question for you. What do you think about the rapture? And we're just answering questions all over the place, but we really have no systematic Bible study sometimes. We need to do better as a body of Christ. And I'm talking about Able Street particularly. I'm just talking about the body of Christ. If we want a thriving congregation in the next generation in this community, I think it's very important that we do what we're supposed to do here. I believe that most congregations that are struggling and dying, it did not happen overnight. It happened by decisions that were made years ago, and people got in a mode. And when that happens, and we think we're okay, because the numbers are there, and then you look around, and before you know it, members start dying out. And you look around, most congregations, where's the young people? They're not there. They're out. And so that's what this is about. It's about changing mindsets and giving us some good ideas. I think he's got some very, very good ideas, and very practical ideas. And so I hope that you can attend. the sessions that we talked about and be a part of that, and come with an attitude that we're gonna accomplish something this year. Because we have a mind to work, I guarantee you we can do something. Um, so those are some things I want you to keep in mind. Anything else you want to talk about before we go to God in prayer and we begin our Bible study this morning? Not. Go ahead. Sure. Man. All right, we're in Mark, the 9th chapter. Mark 9, we titled, Jesus is a man who teaches service. In chapter 10, we're going to see that he's a man who also practices service. We'll discuss that when we get there, but he didn't just tell people what to do the way some people do. He actually did it. He lived it. And so we'll look at that when we get to that part. Just for your remembrance, last time we looked at verses 14, from verses 14 down through verse 29, and we talked about this situation where Jesus has been up on the mountaintop with the inner circle. He comes down and he finds the 9 disciples. They're surrounded by opposition. And this man has brought a son to him, and he wants some help with the son. He's demon possessed. The disciples weren't able to deal with the situation. And we talked about why last time. That they really, it appears, did not rely upon God the way they should. They didn't pray. And so those are some of the things we talked about last time. I wanted to go back and kind of review that for a second because someone came to me last week and said that they, when we finished up, that they had some questions about demon possession. So we can quickly touch on it now if you want to before we go on forward. But what questions do we have? Right. Right. Okay. Uh, I'm going to give you a brief answer, and then I'm going to reference something to you. If you've got access to the internet, I would I'd recommend that if you go to my my blog site, brianhodge.net, there's and type in demons. There's two articles, well, there's several articles on demons, but if you look at demons part 1 and demons part 2, I kind of deal with that. But the quick answer is I believe that demon possession is something that you don't read about in the Old Testament. I know there's a couple of cases that people want to try to say that's demon possession, like with Saul. I don't think Saul had a demon. I think Saul had an evil spirit that came over him. I think he is haunted. I think he is basically going insane. But I don't find what you call demon possession in the Old Testament. But when you open up the New Testament, it's everywhere, isn't it? Over and over and over again. So what do you do with that? There are certain there were certain ones in the 17 and 1800s that began to suggest this demon possession really it was just physical or mental illness, and there really isn't such thing as demon possession. Well, demon possession is associated with physical illness and with people not being in the right mind, but that's certainly not an inadequate. That's certainly not an adequate explanation. Demons spoke. Demons knew Jesus and his servants. Demons believe and tremble. And there is, in some passages, a distinction that is made between the healing of physical ailments and the casting out of demons. They're listed separately. So I don't think that's the explanation. So what is it? Well, there are two basic views of what demon possession was. Some have suggested demons were fallen angels, and these fallen angels were allowed to take up residence in people. Others believe that demons were wicked men, spirits of wicked men who have passed away, who were allowed to come back and take up possession of people. And I think that's probably true. I think that's consistent with how the Jews use the term in their writings. And we can go into a lot of detail about that. But still, you got the question: why does it come up all of a sudden? I think the reference for this coming up is this shows this is done. I believe it's allowed, just like God's ultimately in control of everything, including, if you go back to the book of Job and you look at what Satan did. God's the one who allows that. And he also is the one who limits that. But he's got his reasons for doing it. He doesn't have to express it, but God's in control. Well, I think God certainly allowed this. And he allowed this at this time. For what purpose? Well, my theory is that he allowed this at this time because this allows Jesus and his apostles to show their authority. They're going to work miracles in a physical realm, but Jesus' authority isn't just over the physical realm, it's over the spirit realm. And I think this is allowed temporarily for a time being so that their authority can be set forth. And I think with the passing of miracles, you also have the passing of demon possession. If that's not the case, if it's not the case that you have the passing of demon possession with the passing of miracles, and it takes a miracle to end demon possession, to cast out a demon, then you would have a situation where there's no help today, is ultimately what you'd have. There would be no help for this. Zechariah chapter 13, 1 and 2 speaks of a time when Jehovah would cause the prophets and the unclean spirits to depart the land. Some believe that's a reference to the passing, a foretelling of the passing of unclean spirits out of the land, referring to demon possession. Maybe. But there's a lot of mysteries here that we maybe don't have all the answers to, but that's my thoughts, is that this is to show the power of Jesus and the apostles. Well, Revelation chapter 20 talks about that. I think that's talking about just before he comes, that there's going to be he's bound now and he's going to be unloosed. And I think that context has got to do with world persecution. I think it's a picture of bad, terrible days coming. But I don't know of any passage that maybe teaches this, in one passage as clear as maybe we'd like it to be. But I don't find it in the Old Testament. And if you do find it in the Old Testament, it's certainly not prevalent, but it's everywhere in the New Testament. And what I gather from that is this is another way of showing Jesus' authority. He has all authority in heaven and earth, and I think that's the point that's being made. Even the demons are subject to him. Any other thoughts? Mm-hmm. Well, demon possession continues after the cross. You got it in the book of Acts. So it still takes place in the book of Acts. But it appears to be more and more infrequent as you read on, and you don't have a lot of references to demon possession when you look at the epistles at all. So that's the best I can do for you, I think. No, they're intelligent beings that certainly know who he is. They're capable of believing, which tells us that belief by itself is not what he's looking for. He's looking for a whole lot more than just mental belief, mental assent. They believe and tremble. Shudder. All right. Let's press on. Really, this case with demon possession brings up some other things as we go on through the chapter, as was pointed out. So in verse 30, then they departed from there and passed through Galilee, and he did not want anyone to know it. Again, I think he's trying to find some rest. And he taught his disciples and said to them, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and after he is killed, he will rise the third day. But they did not understand this saying, and were afraid to ask him. Okay. So again, he, for the second time, declares in the book of Mark his death and his resurrection, and they don't understand how. And putting yourself in their situation, they're probably thinking, how could the Messiah, who's going to establish a kingdom, be put to death? And what is this about a resurrection? They're afraid to ask. Matthew's account says they were sorrowful. It troubled them. I think that they understand that what he's saying doesn't sound good. Even though they may not understand all of this, it sounds like something very bad's about to happen. And they're sorrowful over it. Now, with that said, look what happens next. Then he came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, what was it you disputed among yourselves on the road? They kept silent, for on the road they had disputed among themselves who would be the greatest. And he sat down and called the 12 and said, if anyone desires to be the first, he shall be last of all and servant of all. And then he took a little child, set him in the midst of them, and when he had taken him in his arms, he said to them, whoever receives one of these little children in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me. All right. Keep all of this in mind before we get to the next section. You've got disciples who can't cast out a demon. Now you've got disciples arguing about who the greatest is. And keep those two things in mind before we get to the next section. You know, it's amazing to me. Jesus speaks of his death, and they're arguing about greatness. Why? Some think that this may have been done to get their thoughts off of the subject of death. I mean, after all, we don't want to talk about death. We want to talk about a kingdom. But you know, it's evident from looking at other passages there, it's not just that. They're envious of each other. You remember in Mark chapter, in Mark chapter 10, we're going to see two of the disciples, and they want to sit on the left hand and the right hand. And the other disciples they're not happy about that. And you remember in John chapter 21, when Jesus confronts Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. And you work through that. And then Jesus tells him what kind of death he's going to die in serving him. And what does Peter do? You remember? He turns to John. He says, what about him? What's going to happen to him? Jesus' point is, don't worry about what's going to happen to him. You do what you're supposed to do. They're envious of each other. Chronologically, there are at least 3 occasions where they argue about who the greatest is. This is the first. They'll argue about it again in Mark chapter 10. And then they'll argue about it a third time. It's not recorded in Mark, but it's recorded in Luke chapter 22, 24, and following. At least 3 times they argue about who the greatest is. And Jesus tells them that they've got to change the way they think. That the great do not think of themselves as being high and mighty, too high and mighty to receive a little child. And I think the point he's making is you've got to care for the small, you've got to care for the weak, you've got to care about people, you've got to be ready to serve. Mark chapter 10, verses 13 and 14. They brought little children to him that he might touch them, but the disciples rebuked those who brought them. But when Jesus saw it, he was greatly displeased and said, let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of God. We're going to Jerusalem. We're going to establish a kingdom. We don't have time for a bunch of little kids. Jesus thought differently. They've got to change their mindset. They've got to learn to care for the small and the weak and even children. And then he says that if you want to be great, you need to be a servant of all. You're going to see that in Mark chapter 10, 42 through 45. And then he's going to say also that if you want to be great, greatness is found in humility. Matthew chapter 18, 1 through 5. The kingdom is very different than how most people think. We think of greatness in our society as someone who barks orders and tells people what to do. He's a great man. He can command troops to go into battle while he's 1,000 miles away from battle. It's greatness. What we have here is greatness is service. It's leading. It's doing. Jesus washed the feet of the disciples. He didn't say, go wash your feet. I can give you orders. He showed them how to humble himself and serve. And so This lesson, like I say, is going to come up again. Any thoughts on true greatness? I think it's true of elders and deacons, since we're on the subject of elders and deacons. Elders and deacons never were designed to be a board of directors that sit back and simply made decisions. They can make decisions, I get that. The kind of service that he really wanted is people who did what they're supposed to. That is, they served and they set the example and they showed people how to live, and they cared about people. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah, that's certainly the point that he's going to make later when he talks about the little ones that believe in him. He's not talking about children in that sense. There, he's clearly talking about a childlike spirit. But in this case, he takes a little child, he sets him in the midst. And when he had taken him in his arms, I think this is literally a little child. But he's using this little child to talk about more than just little children. He's talking about your concern about the small, the weak, the humble, people that would be easy to overlook. Right. Well, when you read Matthew's account, um, he begins to tell them they're going to Jerusalem. He's going to suffer many things there. He's going to be killed, and we're told time and again through there that he had set his face to go to Jerusalem. This is really the turning point. Chapter 8 and chapter 9 in Mark, chapter 16 in Matthew, where the last leg of his journey starts taking place. His sights are on Jerusalem. And they know that a kingdom's coming. Everybody knows a kingdom's coming. They get a wrong impression of the kingdom, but what happens when Jesus enters Jerusalem? They treat him like a king, don't they? They're ready for him to be king. But yeah, I think this is their expectation. They just don't understand the kingdom yet. I believe they do. You remember when the confession is made, um, he he says in Mark's account, "Who do you say that I am?" But in Matthew's account, it says in Matthew chapter 16, where he says here, "Who do you say I am? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." That's verse 16. "Blessed are you, Simon Barjona, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And as I've said to you, you are Peter, on this rock I will build my church." Um, and you read on down from there. It doesn't say Son of Man, it says Son of God there. But there are statements, I'd have to look it up. There are statements that where Jesus clearly in the context uses the term Son of Man to refer him to himself. And so, yes, I believe that they understand that. Any other thoughts? You know, it'd be speculation, but my speculation would be, sometimes people don't want the answer. They really don't want to know. We've got enough details. I don't want any more details. That's my thoughts. Look at just look on to verses 38 and following, because this all ties in with what we've seen to this point. Now John answered him, saying, Teacher, we saw someone who does not follow us casting out demons in your name, and we forbade him because he does not follow us. Jesus said, Do not forbid him, for no one who works a miracle in my name can soon afterwards speak evil of me. He who is not against us is on our side, and whoever gives us you a cup of water to drink in my name, because you belong to Christ, surely I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. Okay. This is a very, very, very misused passage if you're not familiar. There are certain ones who read this, and their takeaway from this is that they use this to say this justifies us accepting denominations, us accepting all kinds of people who believe all kinds of things. And there is no evidence, there's absolutely no evidence this man was teaching anything different than what Jesus would have them teach. None whatsoever. So, but you need to know people misuse this all the time. So let's talk about what's going on here. Let's keep in mind the context. The disciples have failed to cast out a demon. Here's this man casting out a demon. Secondly, they've been arguing about who the greatest is, and who is this guy? He's not even one of us. He hadn't been with us. So that's kind of what's going on in the disciples' mind. Here are some things for us to understand. This man could do no real miracle unless his power had been given to him. So where did he get the power? Well, he either got it directly from God or he got it from Jesus. I believe from Jesus. Secondly, Jesus could have given this man power without the disciples ever knowing. After all, they had been gone away upon a limited commission not too long ago, hadn't they? You think he encountered anybody during that time that they didn't know? There's indication throughout Scripture that there are numerous people that they didn't know. Jesus knows an owner of a cult, the owner of an upper room, and others that they're not familiar with. Later, Jesus sends out 70. I think chronologically later in this, but he sends out 70 other disciples, Luke chapter 10, and he empowers them miraculously. So if this man's got miraculous power, I would suggest to you it probably came from Jesus. And if not from Jesus, directly from God, but probably from Jesus. Another thing to consider is there's no evidence that this man was teaching anything different. No indication of that in Scripture. So it doesn't parallel denominationalism at all. The issue is one of jealousy. And if you're going to bring it down to modern times, you might say something like this: well, he didn't go to our school of preaching. Well, who's he? Imagine a member of the church who comes into, maybe he comes into this area. He moves in from somewhere else, and he's teaching people, and we say, well, who does he think he is? He's never been a part of this congregation. Well, he's new to town, and he's already talking to people. Oh, we got to stop him. Why? Why would you want to stop a man from doing that? Jealousy. Yes. Um, yeah, I think that's true. I certainly think it's true. Yeah, that's what they're thinking. And there's related passages to this too. You see this before. There's a passage in the Old Testament where this comes up. Anybody remember when? Well, it concerns prophecy. Numbers chapter 11, 24 and following. And Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 men of the elders and of the people and placed them around the tabernacle. And the Lord came down in a cloud and spoke to him and took the spirit that was upon him and placed the same upon the 70 elders. And it happened when the spirit rested upon them that they prophesied, although they never did so again. And so you read down through this, verse 26, and 2 men had remained in the camp, and the name was, and it mentions her name, Spirit continues to rest upon them. And a young man runs and tells Moses, verse 27, that Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp, and Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, one of the choice men, answered and said, Moses, my Lord, forbid them. And Moses said to him, are you zealous for my sake? Oh, that all of the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord was to put his spirit upon them. Or what about Philippians chapter 1, where Paul's in prison, people are preaching for all kinds of different motives. Some are doing so out of selfish ambition. God knows who those are, and some are doing it genuinely. And God knows who those people are. But notice Paul's attitude. He says in verse 15, some indeed preach Christ, even from envy and strife, and some also from goodwill. Or preach Christ from selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing to add affliction to my chains, but the latter out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. What then? What do I think about this? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached, and in this I will rejoice. It's not that he's rejoicing in people who are preaching for the wrong motives. That's not the point. But the point is, if Christ is being preached, I rejoice in that. I'm not, and it's in a context where people are envious of each other. Paul's attitude is, I'm not envious of anybody. If Christ is preached, I'm going to rejoice in that point. So that's the issue. The issue is, you've got 12 disciples, a kingdom's coming, And with this kingdom coming, they're thinking about their importance, their position, their power. We can't have this guy. He might get my spot. I think that's what's going on with them. And so we told him to stop it. What kind of attitude is that? It happens, and the same attitudes with us even to this day in the church at times. You got people that envy each other. I've heard of song leaders that envy each other. I've heard of who's getting the most time. I've heard of preachers who argue about who gets the best slot at some speaking assignment. I got to speak after lunch, and you got the evening crowd. Jealousy. That's ridiculous. And so this is what's going on. So understand these 12 men. We think of them as supermen sometimes. They're just men. And they're men that had all the flaws that we've got. And he still used them, didn't he? These are not people without weaknesses and difficulties. They're just like us in all of these respects. So notice see. Look at verse 41. Whoever gives you a cup of water in my name, because you belong to Christ, as surely I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. Point is even small deeds done for you don't even have to do something great. Even small deeds done for the cause of Christ is important to him. He recognizes it and takes note of that. And so you're telling this man to stop. He's doing something good. And I'm telling you, that's not the only way you can do something good is by doing big things. It's even small things. Notice Matthew chapter 10. Somebody read verses 40 through 42 of Matthew 10. Okay. So he takes note of even small things we do if we're doing it to further the kingdom. Back to something Dale mentioned. Do they know that he's the Son of Man? Look at how it's worded in Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. He comes to the region of Caesarea Philippi, and he asks his disciples, saying, now what's the words in verse 13? Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Yeah, it's clear to me. They know he's calling himself the Son of Man. Okay. Yeah, it's well, in the New Testament, that's true. It's interesting when you go through Ezekiel, for instance. It's not just Ezekiel, but you go through the book of Ezekiel. You've got about the same number of occurrences where Ezekiel's referred to this as the Son of Man. Son of Man refers to humanity, his humanity, but it may refer, when you refer to Jesus, to more than that, because Daniel 7 talks about one like unto the Son of Man receiving kingdom. Daniel chapter 7. All right. We're about out of time for today. But I think there's the two or three takeaways I would have from this is we need to be servants. We need to stop worrying about who gets credit. We certainly don't need to forbid people from doing good when they do good. And these are some of the big points that are set forth here. He goes from this in verses 42 and following by talking about, if you cause one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble. That may well be tied into what they did with rebuking this guy. It is a serious thing when we cause someone to stumble in the faith. And so that may directly be tied into what they just did. And that is, he's trying to do a good thing. You're telling him not to? I want you to know it'd be better that a millstone be wrapped around somebody's neck and he'd be cast into the sea than cause one of these little ones that believe in me to stumble. In other words, there's something a whole lot worse than death. And so don't do that. Don't hinder people. Don't stand in their way. Help them get to heaven. Don't hinder them from getting there. All right, we'll close there. I appreciate your attention this morning. I am